Good evening, everyone, and welcome to True Scary Stories. This story is called Communion. My husband and I married 5 years ago. His grandmother passed away several months before the wedding and left him a sizable inheritance. We used the money to purchase our dream home. It was in an affluent but old part of town. The house included a swimming pool, an attic-turned sewing room, and a stocked wine cellar. Our new neighbors welcomed us with a fruit basket the day we moved in. We talked for only a short while, but they gave us the rundown on the neighborhood, including the history of our house. It was owned by an older couple. They both worked in advertising. She was a dressmaker in her spare time, while he was a wine connoisseur. The wife contracted a rare type of cancer the year before. She became bedridden after a couple of months, her husband attending to her every need. She would have suffered immense pain if not for the high doses of morphine her doctor prescribed. Her husband wasn't able to see his dear wife suffer. He euthanized her with a lethal amount of morphine at her behest. However, he could not stand the thought of living without her, so he committed suicide using the same method. Our neighbors saw the look on my face and could tell the story shook me. They said they considered the circumstances of their deaths romantic, not horrifying. I agreed to spare any guilty feelings. Dan sensed my continued trouble as we readied for bed. He asked me why the story so affected me. I explained that, as a Christian, the church taught me that suicide was a mortal sin. God could not forgive a person for it, so anyone who commits suicide was damned to hell for eternity. I couldn't get the picture of our home's former owners being condemned out of my mind. Dan and I were falling asleep when we heard a loud noise downstairs. It sounded like something fragile smashed against the floor. We both rose to investigate, Dan leading the way. We searched the main floor, finding nothing out of place. I suggested Dan check the wine cellar. He proceeded downstairs, finding a wine bottle broken on the ground between 2 of the 5 rows of racks. It was empty, so it was a fast cleanup. I felt uncomfortable while in the cellar, though it was bright and charming. Dan dropped by work for a couple of hours the next morning. I continued unpacking and setting up the house while he was gone. I felt a foreboding while working in the kitchen. A crash came from the cellar. I stood at the stairs, the cellar light shining, but failed to descend. I closed the door and waited for Dan's return. Another crash came 5 minutes later. I summoned the courage to check the disturbance this time. I paused at the bottom and peeked around the corner. 2 broken wine bottles lay on the floor. I grabbed a wastebasket and walked down the aisle. Thankful these bottles were empty too, I picked up the pieces of glass. My unease disappeared upon hearing Dan walk through the front door. I let him know I was in the cellar and continued cleaning up the shards of glass, but sliced a finger. The blood bubbled up from the cut, then began running down my finger, dripping onto the floor. There is a small 2-piece bathroom downstairs, so I checked it for a Band-Aid and some paper towels while Dan galloped down the staircase. I rummaged through the cabinet as Dan came to the doorway. "Hey, hon," I said, "can you please get me a Band-Aid from the upstairs bathroom? I cut my finger pretty bad picking up another broken bottle." He turned and ran back upstairs. A 3rd bottle crashed to the ground behind me. I froze, afraid to look. I wanted to call for Dan, but was unable to speak. Composing myself, I tiptoed from the bathroom and looked down the aisle at the broken bottle. I swore I saw a shadow on the ground. It moved over the bottom rack to the adjacent aisle. I became petrified again. Dan scampered down the stairs. Thank God, I thought. "Dan, quick, there's something down here." He stepped behind me, placing a hand on my shoulder. I pointed to the other aisle. "It's over there now," I said, turning to him. Dan wasn't there. In fact, he wasn't even home. I remember sprinting up the staircase. I'm not sure if I was screaming. When Dan did return, he found me locked in the bedroom. I did my best to explain what had occurred, though he appeared incredulous. Regardless, he went to the cellar to investigate. He acknowledged the broken bottles when he returned, but didn't see any shadows or feel any presence. I insisted that Dan call our church and request a blessing of our home. A week passed without incident when Father Mitchell, the priest who married us, dropped by to perform the ceremony. He walked through every room, including the cellar, reciting prayers and sprinkling holy water. While we did not inform him about the broken wine bottles or shadows I thought I saw, I did tell him about the home's previous owners and their apparent suicides. Father Mitchell told me that the topic of suicide is still debated within the church. Some teach that people who commit suicide are condemned to hell. Others teach that God forgives the sin, allowing entrance into heaven. Another camp believes their souls continue to walk the earth as spirits, caught in a kind of purgatory, unable to find their way to heaven. After the blessing, we invited Father Mitchell to stay for dinner. He obliged and said grace before we ate. I asked him to say a special blessing, one for the previous owners' souls. He recited the following verse from the New Testament. "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I am going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will also come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going." After the blessing, we toasted to our new home using a bottle of wine from the cellar. Dan and I pray before dinner every night. We recite the verse Father Mitchell used and always finish with a sip of wine from the cellar. We never again experienced anything abnormal in the house.